The long way home. Milo had always taken the same route home, through the city streets, past the dimly lit gas station, and down the wooded shortcut behind the old elementary school. It shaved a good 10 minutes off his walk, and after working late at the diner, every minute counted. His co-workers always warned him about that path. "Man, don't take that creepy trail. People say weird things happen there at night." James, the line cook, had told him once, shaking his head. But Milo had never seen anything strange. Just trees, broken fence posts, and the occasional flickering street lamp at the far end. Besides, he was too exhausted most nights to care about local legends. Tonight, however, was different. The air felt heavier than usual, thick with an unsettling stillness. Even the crickets, which usually filled the night with their endless chirping, were silent. A thin mist curled around the trees, swirling unnaturally in the dim moonlight. Milo pulled his hoodie tighter around himself, shaking off the unease as he stepped onto the dirt path. His sneakers crunched against the gravel, the only sound in the unnatural quiet. He checked his phone, 1:37 a.m. The battery was at 12%, but that was enough to get home. Halfway down the trail, he saw it. A figure, standing perfectly still in the mist. Milo's breath caught in his throat. It was too far away to make out any details, just a tall, unmoving silhouette. He stopped walking, gripping his phone a little tighter. His first instinct was to turn around and go back, but the diner was already locked, and he wasn't about to stand outside in the cold all night. Instead, he kept moving, forcing himself to act casual. Maybe it was just some drunk guy or a homeless person. But as he got closer, his stomach twisted. The figure wasn't facing him. It was facing the trees, and it wasn't breathing. Milo slowed his steps, his pulse hammering in his ears. His gut screamed at him to turn back, but his legs carried him forward. He couldn't help it. Morbid curiosity, maybe. Just as he passed within a few feet of the figure, he stole a quick glance. It had no face. Milo's breath hitched. The thing standing beside him had the shape of a person, but its face was smooth, featureless. No eyes, no mouth. Just pale, stretched skin where human features should be. Then it moved. The thing's head snapped toward him, as if it had just realized he was there. Milo bolted. His feet barely touched the ground as he sprinted down the path, heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't look back. He didn't want to see if it was following. The trees blurred past him. He saw the flickering street lamp up ahead, the end of the shortcut just beyond it. If he could just get past that light, he'd be safe. But as he neared it, something changed. The street lamp wasn't where it should be. The exit was gone. Milo skidded to a stop, gasping for breath. The path stretched endlessly before him, looping back into the woods like he'd never left. He turned around, nothing but trees. His shortcut was gone. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He was trapped. A low whisper broke the silence. Milo spun around, his pulse spiking. The whisper wasn't coming from any direction in particular. It was all around him, seeping from the trees, from the ground, from the air itself. "Stay with us." Milo clamped his hands over his ears. "No, no, no, no." The whisper grew louder. A chorus of voices now, overlapping, tangled, speaking in tones too distorted to be human. Then the footsteps started. Soft at first, then growing heavier, coming from everywhere at once. Milo turned and ran. He didn't care where, he just had to get out. He sprinted past trees that all looked the same, his legs burning, lungs screaming for air. He glanced at his phone. 6% battery, no signal. Then, up ahead, a figure, another one, standing still, facing the trees just like the first. Milo veered left, cutting through the brush, but another figure appeared, then another, and another, dozens of them, lined up between the trees, motionless, faceless. He was surrounded. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled to a halt. The whispering swelled to a deafening roar. The faceless figures twitched, their heads snapping toward him in unison. And then they moved. Milo turned and ran blindly, crashing through the undergrowth, branches clawing at his clothes. He had to get out. He had to. Then, suddenly, he was back on the sidewalk. The shortcut was gone. He was standing outside the gas station, panting, drenched in sweat. Cars passed by on the main road, their headlights casting brief streaks of light across his shaking hands. Milo spun around. The wooded path was there, just as it always had been. Silent. Still. Normal. His phone buzzed, a notification. He glanced down, 1:38 a.m. He had been gone for only 1 minute. His heart pounded as he checked his messages, desperate to ground himself in reality. But when he unlocked his phone, his stomach dropped. A single, unread message. Unknown number. It contained only 2 words. Wrong turn. Milo deleted the message, turned off his phone, and walked home without looking back. He never took the shortcut again. But sometimes, late at night, when he walked past the old schoolyard, he swore he could hear them whispering his name. Waiting.
Whispers in the wall. The old house on Sycamore Lane had always been an eyesore. Its peeling paint and sagging roof made it the perfect candidate for local ghost stories. But to Ava, a 22-year-old college dropout, eager for a fresh start, it was home, for now. The rent was cheap, the location was quiet, and she had nowhere else to go. It was the 3rd night in the house when the whispers began. At first, Ava thought it was just the creaking of the ancient pipes. She lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the faint murmurs that seemed to drift through the walls. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. But tonight, it was louder. Help me? Ava bolted upright, her heart pounding. She strained her ears, listening for the sound again. Nothing but the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen below. She shook her head. She was probably just tired. Moving into the house had been stressful, and she hadn't exactly been sleeping well. Determined to shake off her unease, she got out of bed and padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. The floorboards groaned under her feet as she made her way down the narrow hallway, flicking on the lights as she went. In the kitchen, she froze. The faucet was running. Ava frowned. She didn't remember leaving it on. She approached the sink cautiously and turned the knob, silencing the stream of water. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window above the sink. For a moment, she thought she saw movement behind her, a shadow flickering in the hallway. She spun around, but the hall was empty. "Get a grip," she muttered, taking a deep breath. She headed back to bed, clutching her glass of water. As she passed the hallway closet, she heard it again, faint and desperate. "Help me." The voice was coming from inside the wall. Ava's pulse quickened. She pressed her ear against the plaster. There it was again, a faint whisper, almost inaudible. "Please, help." Her hands trembled as she stepped back. What was this? A prank? A neighbor? But the house was old and isolated, with no shared walls. Unable to shake her curiosity, Ava grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. She examined the wall closely. The paint was chipped, and there were small cracks running along its surface. Something about it felt off. On impulse, she retrieved a hammer from the toolbox she hadn't yet unpacked. She hesitated for a moment, then swung it against the wall. The plaster crumbled easily, revealing a hollow space behind it. And something moved inside. Eva stumbled back, her heart racing. Hello? Is someone in there? No answer. Gathering her courage, she swung the hammer again, widening the hole until she could see inside. She shone her flashlight into the darkness and screamed. A pale, emaciated hand shot out, clawing at the edges of the hole. Eva scrambled back as the rest of the figure emerged. It was a woman, her skin gray and stretched tight over her bones. Her hollow eyes glistened in the beam of Eva's flashlight. "Help me," the woman croaked, her voice barely a whisper. Eva couldn't move. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her body refused to obey. The woman crawled toward her, leaving a trail of dust and decay in her wake. "Who are you?" Eva managed to choke out. The woman stopped, her head tilting at an unnatural angle. "I was like you once," she rasped. "Young, alive." Eva's stomach turned. "What happened to you?" The woman's lips curled into a grotesque smile. "I stayed." Suddenly, the air grew cold, and the lights flickered. Shadows danced across the walls, and the whispers grew louder, surrounding her. "Leave," the woman hissed, "before it takes you too." The lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. Eva screamed, swinging her flashlight wildly. When the lights flickered back on, the woman was gone. Only the broken wall remained, the hollow space now empty. Eva didn't sleep that night. By morning, she had packed her belongings and left the house. She didn't care about the lost deposit or where she'd go next. Anything was better than staying. A week later, she saw a news report about the house. The landlord had listed it for rent again, the broken wall patched up, as if nothing had ever happened. The reporter mentioned the property's history, multiple disappearances over the years, tenants who vanished without a trace. Eva turned off the TV, her hands trembling. She was safe now, or so she thought. That night, as she lay in her new apartment, she heard it again. "Help me." This time, it was coming from her closet. The visitor. The storm had rolled in without warning. Thick sheets of rain lashed against the farmhouse windows, and distant thunder grumbled like a restless giant. Mia, a 17-year-old high school senior, stood at the sink, washing the last of the dinner plates. She hated being alone on stormy nights, but her parents were out for the anniversary dinner, and her little brother, Tommy, had fallen asleep hours ago. She glanced at the clock, 9:17 p.m. The faint hum of the television from the living room filled the air, mingling with the rhythm of the rain. Mia sighed, drying her hands on a dish towel. That's when she noticed the figure. Through the kitchen window, just beyond the barn, stood a man in a dark coat. He wasn't moving. Her breath caught in her throat. She wiped the foggy glass with her sleeve, but the figure remained, his outline illuminated by the weak light of the barn's flood lamp. Mia's stomach tightened. Maybe it was just a trick of the rain. Then he moved. The man took a single step forward, slow and deliberate. Mia stumbled back, her heart hammering. She grabbed her phone and dialed her mom, but the line went straight to voicemail. "Come on," she whispered, pacing the kitchen. She was about to call the police when she heard a knock at the front door. It wasn't frantic or aggressive, just a single, solid knock. Mia froze. The door was locked, and she hadn't heard a car pull up, meaning whoever was outside had walked here. The nearest neighbor was miles away. Who's there? She called out, her voice trembling. Silence. Another knock, louder this time. Mia grabbed a kitchen knife and crept toward the living room, her eyes darting to the window. She peeked through the curtains, but the porch light revealed nothing. No man, no car, just rain and shadows. The knock came again, but this time it was at the back door. Mia spun around, her pulse racing. How had he moved so quickly? The back door led to the kitchen, and there was no way to get there without being seen from the front porch. She clutched the knife tighter, her palms slick with sweat. "Mia," a voice whispered. She gasped. It was faint, almost swallowed by the storm, but unmistakable. The voice was coming from the back door, low and gravelly. Her name. How did he know her name? "Mia, let me in." "No!" She screamed. Her eyes darted toward the stairs. She needed to get to Tommy. If this man was trying to break in, she wouldn't let her little brother be in danger. She bolted up the steps, 2 at a time, her bare feet slipping on the hardwood. Tommy's room was at the end of the hall. She flung the door open, and there he was, fast asleep under his Avenger's blanket. Mia shook him gently. "Tommy, wake up," she whispered, her voice breaking. His eyes fluttered open. "What's wrong?" "Someone's outside. We have to hide." Tommy rubbed his eyes. "Outside? Who?" The sound of glass shattering downstairs answered his question. Mia pulled Tommy out of bed, her knife clattering to the floor as she hoisted him onto her hip. She darted into the closet, pulling the door closed just as heavy footsteps echoed from below. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her hand over Tommy's mouth. He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. The footsteps moved through the house, deliberate and unhurried. Whoever it was, they weren't in a rush. Mia's mind raced. Should she call the police? But what if the man heard her? The sound of doors creaking open and slamming shut made her blood run cold. The footsteps grew louder, closer. The bedroom door creaked open. Mia held her breath. Through the slats of the closet door, she could see a shadow stretch across the floor. A faint, wheezing breath filled the room. "Mia." The voice called again, softer this time. "You can't hide forever." Tommy whimpered against her hand. The shadow stopped in front of the closet. She could hear the rustle of fabric as the man reached for the handle. Suddenly, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. Headlights cut through the rain, sweeping across the bedroom walls. The man froze, then turned and bolted down the stairs. Mia waited, her heart pounding, until she heard the front door slam shut. She peeked out of the closet just in time to see her parents stepping inside, shaking the rain from their coats. "Mom! Dad!" She screamed, running to them, with Tommy in tow. "What's wrong?" her mom asked, her face pale with concern. "There was a man. He was in the house," Mia cried. "He broke the window." Her dad grabbed the fireplace poker and searched the house, but the intruder was gone. The only sign of his presence was the shattered window in the kitchen. Later that night, after the police had come and gone, Mia sat in bed, clutching her phone. Tommy had fallen asleep beside her, his tiny hands gripping her arm. She stared at the window. her mind replaying the events over and over. Who was the man? What did he want?